Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Conversations with Us, episode number 8, featuring the one, the only Billy Langa. He is an award-winning actor, award-winning writer, director, producer, co-founder of TheatreDuo, and a lecturer at the Market Laboratory. Billy Langa, thank you so much for joining us, King.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me, man.
Man, it's good to see you, bruh.
Yeah.
You've been through a whole lot in the past few weeks, and you kept saying before we started recording that God is good,
Sure.
and that they must never tell us that God is not good.
They must never lie to us.
They must never lie to us.
Never.
Man, first and foremost, dog, what do you think of just the story? I heard your reaction. It was and I'd really love to figure out what resonated with you.
It's the violence in pleasure, other way around, to the pleasure in violence. In my head, I'm going, sure, which one is being sought after here? Which one closes which gap? There is an absolute hole, right?
Yeah.
That needs feeling. And watching here, I'm going, it is so vile. Yet the practice of it is what gives pleasure.
Yes.
What we must, like a thing, the way we can get pleasure out of. Yet the way it's showed and what the person is going through is in a very volatile manner. And I'm wondering, is this experience, is this big cause of? Is it a thing of a result of? And then it makes me wonder, like, when did things shift? Were things like this for her throughout, or was there a particular experience that made things like this now? And I think what stands out for me is the juxtaposition of the thing that must be pleasurable, but yet experience of violence. The extremities.
Yeah. The extremities. Yeah, I think, with You Are My Reason, that is the high. I mean, again, it's open to interpretation.
Totally.
Is she seeking pleasure from the violence, or
Sure.
is she just trying to find, herself, or
Sure.
she trying to? What is it that can be done?
Sure.
In order for her not to feel this way anymore, and I think it's so common even with human experience.
Sure.
There's things we put ourselves through because they will bring us pleasure,
Yeah.
but we know very well that they're actually destroying us.
Sure.
I've been exposed to a few people that have gone due to trauma,
Sure.
and they find themselves in doing self-destructive behavior.
Sure.
Out of, I'm seeking for pleasure,
Sure.
I'm seeking a high, I'm seeking for fun, but Monday comes and
Picking up the pieces.
And how long this cycle must go on?
Sure.
What does one need to do in order to stop this cycle, to
Sure.
break this cycle?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same question we've been asking ourselves about generational poverty.
Right.
How do you break that
Yeah.
cycle
Yeah.
of generational poverty, generational trauma, to create the other side of generational wealth? But again, in creating generational wealth, there is pain.
Right, yeah.
To create that
Strife.
pleasure.
Yeah. Beautiful, yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's the other side of the coin, right? That we don't want to explore fully. And I think even it's in the language. I mean, the way you're putting it, it's so beautiful that because we're speaking about pleasure and, you know, that I was making a joke, and I say to the ladies there in the office, I'm like, yo, you know?
Yeah.
It hurts me. I can feel it doing the things inside of me.
Yeah.
That I want it.
You want it.
Yet I know exactly what it's doing.
Yeah.
And the inverse of that is how much work you're going to have to do to fix the pain that's happening in the intestines.
Yeah.
For you to enjoy the pleasures of that, right? The result as pleasure instead of the pleasure then resulting into destruction. Rather work from building, and then enjoy that. And of course, the building is painful. But we don't speak enough about that. And that's why I say it's probably in the languaging, in the way we churn out information. Is that pleasure is the desirable place to be at. So we want to skip the
pain.
Yeah, the pain part of getting to the pleasure stage.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating that, you know, it is actually a yin and yang kind of.
In everything.
Yes, there's a duality.
Everything, there's a duality.
Yeah.
You know, it's beautiful that you speak about it when you go into duality.
Sure.
Because you once said to me, I was writing, I was actually preparing for my one-hander.
Sure.
Which was largely inspired by Twalo and how
Sure.
you just created that world. You once said it is a personal narrative, but a public story.
Sure.
So when you tell the story, forget that it's a personal narrative.
Sure.
Tell the public story, although it's a personal narrative, because you wrote it and everything.
Sure.
But then you have to detach from that. And again, that's the yin and yang. You know, when you've written something and now you need to show it to the people,
Sure.
and the people must relate to it.
Yes.
Can you just go into a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, it's the idea of community is people, right? And individuals are within a community. You cannot exist outside of the people. A person is because there are people. That's how we identify a person. It's like even in theater studies that we do, you know, when you speak about the chorus and isolating one body, you know, out of the chorus and there, you can only see that one body because there's this many. But when you put them together, they are all there. And you can see one of them, like one by one, making this one whole, right? Meaning the lived experiences are communal. They are not individual. Meaning the individual's narrative is a community's narrative. It is because of the community that this person has lived like this or has gone through this, and this is how they are reflecting towards their lived experience. And I think one of the biggest things that we must arrive to is that of celebrating the fact that the reason why we shine is because there is a community that supports that, right? Because if the community wasn't there, then we wouldn't have to look at you. You know, we only look at you because
there's a community.
There exists a community.
One would not exist without the other.
Yes. The community doesn't exist if there are no individuals. Vice versa. You know. So a community is made by individuals, and it is these unique particles that make up this whole. You know, if we look at it even from a scientific perspective, you know, we look at the molecules in a gas format. They are lighter, right? Moving, sporadic, You make them look at, they become many, they're bouncing on each other. You make them solid, they become locked in, and it's constant contact. And that's what like society is. Society is constant contact of individuals. Therefore, social activity, conversation, acknowledgement of one another, and that is like social activity.
Yeah, that's why I guess it was so hard for many of us.
Sure.
When the pandemic hit.
Sure.
Now, like you say, a society is a constant contact of individuals.
Sure.
Now, these individuals have been separated to be individuals, isolated, and some of us can't deal with it.
Sure.
And found it as a time to create.
Right.
But some even lost their lives, and not because of the pandemic, but because of lack of contact with other individuals.
Sure.
So as much as one can be an introvert, it is very you would say that it is very important for people to actually still understand that as much as you're an individual, you are still part of the community.
Totally. There's no way that you make it without. A community fails if it has no individuals.
Yeah.
Because the individuals also make up the identity, and that's why you've got different societies, right?
Yeah.
Because they have an identity. So you would know that the crowd that lives in Newtown breathes like this. And the one goes in the little village
breathes like
this. And the blessing that we have as human beings is we adapt to both space and everything around us. So we know Stingo here in Joburg becomes different when he enters the rural.
Yes.
In manner, in the way he holds himself, in language, tone changes, shifts, becomes much more grounded because the environment alone dictates, right? So you're required to go there, and that's the only way really that you can identify these things, because they, in as much as they stand together, they do stand alone. And a country is because there are 9 provinces.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But these 9 provinces together make up South Africa. And then within all of that, you go even into cities.
Yeah.
Into yards at home.
Yeah.
Into the individuals, the rooms in the house.
Yes.
Into the individuals, the people who live in
that house.
The kids that are born there. So it is like literally like very, like you can break it down to a very molecular space, to atomic spaces, and it's one thing that makes you start realizing that everything is very cosmic, and we speak about energy, and those words are so right because it is an energetic thing, it is a spirit thing. We are not alone, we are with people.
Yes. Wherever we go.
Yeah.
Man, one cannot exist without the other.
Yes.
Which takes me to my next point and my next topic with
Sure.
you. You once also said the mainstream will not listen until the underground makes a noise.
Sure.
So, when I'm listening to what you're saying now, there would be no mainstream without the underground.
Totally.
And in order for the underground to exist, there must be a mainstream.
Yeah.
And they must work hand in hand.
Sure.
Can you tell, and you said this, I was in a very weird space.
Sure.
Psychologically. I was also in a space just trying to be like, yo, I've been knocking.
Sure. No answer.
Why aren't y'all opening up?
Yeah.
But then you said, you just need to continue making the noise.
Sure.
The mainstream will end up listening. How have you found that in your journey as a theatre practitioner, as an educator,
Sure.
and as well as somebody who wants to, who creates work that will resonate even generations from now?
Sure.
You know, how has that affected you, even getting to such, to being able to understand and getting that wisdom
Sure.
to make that statement?
Sure. I mean, you know, even now, like, that's still the quest. I'll tell you that it's so unending, this text, and the idea of a voice, right? Like the identity. That's Ding, you know? This is Stingo's voice. In the underground world or in the mainstream world, that we can constantly identify and go, yeah, this is this person's work, or this person's ideas, or even efforts, in as much as they transform and change over time because of the rules of the world. But essentially, the spaces coexist, and because, you know, like, when you're in the underground space, you're untamed, dog. You're not tamed. You are veld. You are dangerous, right? In a good way for the underground space, but in a terrifying way for the mainstream. Because you're coming out raw and hungry and excited, which threatens the comfortable space for the mainstream. And you realize that the more you grow, the more you can actually coexist with mainstream, and they can utilize your abilities to either advance the mainstream space or themselves as individuals, and you're able to stick to your guns and still remain as authentic as you were in the underground world, right? That you're able to bounce between the spaces, that the person who's from the underground space can still access you enough. Like, mainstream is not the desired location. The underground industry is an industry. So it's not a graduation kind of thing that we're starting underground, therefore to mainstream. It coexists with the mainstream. They are things that exist together. Of course, this one might look flashy, and I say look because that's how it appears.
It does appear like that.
Yeah.
Until you are in that space.
And you realize it is empty. This one might look poor because it's not flashy, right? And it's the idea of the authenticity, and even monetizing authenticity, because it is a place that we must get to. We must advance to that place where we bring about wealth in the authentic. That being authentic does not mean starvation or poverty. You're equally plowing and planting as much as these guys are benefiting from the mainstream, right? Because that end looks like a benefiting space, and the underground space looks like the field, you know, where you're actually working, and then after you've done the work, you go into the mainstream to go harvest.
To harvest. And that's not the case.
That's not the case.
Because even in the mainstream, you must still plow.
Constantly.
And that's beautiful, because it's a common mistake that we make in our early ages of development. You know, and I'm going to talk underground terms. You know, in the early stages of developing, because you're underground, you think, nah, as long as the passion goes, you know, and we don't have enough communications and enough discussions, you would say, in the underground space, there is still opportunity to monetize. In fact, there's more opportunity to monetize. It just needs you to think like a mainstream person.
Yes.
And that's the difference between the successful mainstream people and the unsuccessful underground people.
Sure.
Is that we forget ukuthi these two things coexist, you know, and it's true. The mainstream uses everybody who's in the underground
Of course.
to elevate themselves
The
and make it
quality,
look,
yeah.
you know, so they can get that quality
Sure.
that the underground has.
Yes, yeah.
And we as the underground forget to also use the mainstream
Yeah.
to be like, yo, no, man, I'm an underground artist, but it doesn't stop me just because I'm performing in a small theater.
Sure.
It doesn't stop me from going onto radio and doing
Yes.
and doing interviews,
Sure.
going onto TV and doing interviews, even if it means, yo, you're going to because here's something else that happens with underground. We go to these commercial spaces and we forget how to network.
Totally.
You see the people that you want to see and need to see, and you have communications with them,
Sure.
but it's not the language
Right.
that you guys are speaking at
Yes,
that time.
yeah.
You're not speaking language of collaboration or getting yourself to the next level.
Sure.
It's probably speaking party terms most of the time.
Yep.
Let me get a shot for you. And there's nothing wrong with that, but at the same time, we need to understand that as flashy as it is, it's still hard.
It is difficult.
You
It's
know.
a skill.
It's a skill.
It is a skill. And I mean, you used a nice word that I've been meditating over for quite some time now, the commercial, right? And looking into that, you're realizing that the root of it is also commerce. That's finance.
That's finance.
There's nothing bad with it, basically.
Yeah.
And we sometimes use the word commercial as a derogative term.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Or it's too commercial.
It's too commercial.
But it is supposed to make some finances.
It's supposed to be commercial
Yeah.
in order for it to monetize.
Yes, that's why we term it with that. It's not to take away the authenticity or the depth of the material, the engagement with it, but it is putting an acknowledgement on the fact that the end results must be profitable
Yes.
financially.
Yes.
And like you were saying, totally, we're not learning enough. We're not allowing ourselves to go into the mainstream to learn commerce, to learn money, to learn how to sell our ideas without dumbing them down.
Yes.
So if we are not able to do that, then we will constantly hope or constantly diss mainstream
Yeah.
or hope to get there and eat.
Yeah.
Um,
And not know what's going to hear. There's so much.
There's so much here, food.
Yeah,
There's
so
so
much
much
food.
food. And all we need is a formula to be able to get it out there with some value on it. People to pay for it. If people are willing.
Yes, people are willing to pay for authentic work, pay for work that's... People pay for passion.
Yeah.
People really do pay for passion, but how did you market it? How did you commercialize it?
Yes.
You know, and again, to what you're saying is that once we break, I'm gonna put it in inverted commas, once
Sure.
we break out of the underground space, we now decide to dumb down the work because we think that's commercial. You know, that's what sells, that's
Sure.
beautiful.
Sure.
But if you look at a play such as The Lion King,
Sure.
which is a big commercial piece,
Totally.
but the authenticity there, the lessons,
Sure.
everything
Sure.
that's there,
Sure.
you know,
It all comes across.
it all comes across, and you like, it was the underground that made noise in
Yeah.
order for the mainstream to
say,
listen,
yo, let's do it.
and they never dumbed it down.
Sure.
Man, that is, yeah, man. You know, this was gonna be my last question, but we've already gone into it. You know, monetizing the passion, monetizing the authenticity.
Sure.
We are now slowly but surely moving into the fourth industrial revolution.
Sure.
Where do you see theatre in the fourth industrial revolution? Let's first start there.
You know, I always say to the students that we rely so much on their ideas because we don't know. We only know where we are, us, who are teachers. And things that will unlock the fourth industrial world is these ones coming in with the digital ways of thinking. And the minute we can allow the student's voice and mind and thought to fully exist in the room of learning, and allow that exchange between the facilitator and the student to be transparent, the more we will learn what could possibly be implanted for fourth industry. And clearly the digital age is here.
Yes.
So meaning the infrastructures that we have are far behind. Because the level of technology in the equipment that we have is not in 2022. It is still like in 2006. And that's infrastructure alone. Meaning if we're thinking in those spaces for 2025, we're in big trouble from an engineering perspective. Meaning some things that we want to do creatively become impossible purely because of the mechanics. Not because it's creatively impossible, but infrastructure, this building cannot hold this idea. So this building is too small for this idea. But then it's always pitched like your idea is too abstract for this building. Therefore, which delays and slowly suffocates theatre. Theatre dies within itself. And then we start saying, yo, there's nothing new that's gonna come out of this.
Theatre is dead.
Theatre is dead. But mainly because the buildings have stopped growing. The buildings have stopped housing the theatre of the time. So it stayed in a particular period and accommodated particular ideas for a particular time. But ideas of now, dog, it's these microphones, it's these laptops, it's Wi-Fi, right? And that's how we must direct these things. We must think about phones doing things, right? Because we've got enough Wi-Fi in this room for us to be able to play with projections in this particular way, you know, for technology to fully exist with theatre. Because now theatre is viewed as an old practice.
Yes.
But you realize that technology is equally as old as is theatre. And every year technology grows.
Yes.
And that's why this term feels like an ahead term. Like the term technology feels like it's there. We're always reaching for it. But they probably sprout at the same time that the physicist is as curious as is the storyteller. In the same age, same period, same time. The quest is the same. And then we stop at story. Because the other thing, the beauty about us is that we understand the concepts of space and place, right? But we are not willing to collaborate enough with the science world, which are the subjects that we are always advised to study, especially in South Africa.
Yeah.
No, kids must do maths and science.
Yeah.
Right? Art, yeah. But we're not allowing these spaces to collaborate in thinking. So that the ideas of a person who's 16 years can be housed and properly housed.
Yes.
But at the moment, those houses do not exist.
They do not exist. So, the future of theatre and theatre making in the fourth industrial revolution is, number one, gatekeepers need to open up their minds.
Absolutely.
Like, number one,
Sure.
gatekeepers need to be like, wake up, you guys, it's past your time now.
Sure, it's over.
You know, open up your mind. But also, it's up to us who, you know, I feel like the 90s kids are really, 80s, 90s, you know, really benefited because you've seen the shift.
Sure.
You know,
Totally.
you've seen the musical shift. Every shift you have seen, you know, and experienced and were a part of it.
Sure.
And you're not that old. So these things that we're speaking about, it is actually up to us to implement, you know, that when we're building, because again, it's all good and well that there are spaces that exist,
Sure.
you know, but we are noticing the flaws of those spaces
Yeah.
that already exist.
Sure.
So in whatever it is that we're building, we need to be open to 50 years from now, what happens?
Absolutely.
Like, what happens to this building? 200 years from now, what happens to this building?
Sure.
Can it accommodate those ideas of that time,
Sure.
while also accommodating the ideas of this
Now,
time?
yeah.
You know? But also, as writers,
Sure.
storytellers, creators, producers, whatever you are, it is that you are, it is equally as important. As much as infrastructure needs to accommodate digital ideas,
Sure.
our stories too need to accommodate that.
Sure.
So I guess it's probably also a matter of unlearning
Yeah.
some of the training, because you trained with the Shakespeares,
Sure.
Grotowskis,
Sure.
all of those guys, but those people were
Yeah.
pre-technological era, you know?
Sure.
So perhaps even in institutions, when studying,
We need
perhaps
to-
it needs to be different practitioners.
Sure.
Perhaps it needs to be different practitioners.
Sure.
You know, that are now studied.
Sure.
You know, and I guess that's what we also need to start working towards.
Totally. And I mean, you know, when I constantly think about, especially like the writer's work is so interesting because a writer dreams of being timeless. They dream of surpassing time, either in story or in language. And it's inevitable that, you know, time will happen and some things will be boring. And that's why there's constant reinterpretations of these universal timeless stories. Meaning, in the engagement with the tale or whatever, what you're fighting for is for a story that will live longer. But the way that it's told, that's another thing, right? And you allow so much the choices to be so malleable that when a period ends, another period can pick up the same material and rearrange it, still maintain the same tale. So, and that comes back to exactly what you're saying about that even creatively, we must travel equally as does the architecture, right? Like be as innovative as these guys are, even in the works that we are actually creatively doing. And I'll speak for I don't want to put it racially, but you know what language does, man? Like, I know the minute I begin to think Cascade, something happens to my senses, to my entire spirit, right? There's a sense of purpose that is kind of summoned, the work becomes bigger than me because there's purpose at work. It is at that point where I feel like I'm in the right industry. I'm in the field that I should be in. I'm contributing as much as does the student of architecture contributes to the landscape of this country. I'm doing equally the same in story and language and spiritually, because that's the other space that we exist in as people, as Abantu, let me use that word, because it is so important, because we do exist fully into that space, but we speak of it sacred because it is sacred, but we hide it so much that we hide it even to ourselves, that we miss the magic or the alchemy that sits in understanding the power of that space. That the minute I start uttering things in my own language, I know I'm shifting so many things in the bigger spectrum of time. And if I lock things like that and I think like that and I write language like that, that my language will be valid enough to be read the way that it's written. That no one is going to need to translate it for a better understanding. That the understanding will be Kispedian, that's what it is. It's written like this. Will change so many things in a bigger scheme of things. Even the thinking, man, like politically, financially, because violence is not a white concept.
It's not.
It's not a racial concept.
It's not.
It is a purposeful concept. It is an idea of alignment. I just think if we are aligned to our purposes, money falls in.
It falls in.
Do not forget it.
Yeah, it just goes into
the picture.
Yeah.
Because you're doing the work of your time.
There's so much thought that goes into that.
Sure.
There's so much psychological work that goes into that, because as a storyteller, and as a storyteller that prides themselves with telling stories that are going to be timeless.
Sure.
And can be manipulated and told so many different ways, but it's still the same story.
Sure.
It's just that it was staged differently,
Yes.
said differently because of the certain time that it's in.
Sure.
Example, was Albert, when it's done in schools. I once saw Laura Bai do Was Albert with 8 people.
Sure.
But and it was because of that time. There's so much psychology that goes into that. There's so much work that goes into that mentally.
Sure.
There's so many fights that you fight with the non-believers.
Sure.
The people in your background, from where you come from. You're a writer, you're a theatre, what?
Sure.
There's no money in that. And then they start using examples of people who appeared to have it and didn't have it.
Sure.
And people who were in the mainstream.
Sure.
And appeared to have it but didn't have it.
Sure.
How do you then now balance your mental health with creating the work?
Sure. And that's a very interesting one, because it's hard. It's hard to stay sane. with all the challenges that you're mentioning, that the background believes this. Also, the industry does not fully believe. It's filled with skeptics, and it's easier to dip into mental illness because you're not heard, right? And I'll say, because of the constant meditation on it, with the prayer, if you can use that word, and the constant quest on one's purpose, that keeps me grounded. But the other thing that keeps me grounded is to acknowledge the fact that it is a space of work. So do we have life outside of it that is as fruitful as this is? It serves my reason for being alive. Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes when things are limited to a position, when this position collapses, then that means the whole structure falls flat. And it's one of the challenges that I faced when I got the car accident. Mm-hmm. When I thought about speech, I thought about appearance. Will I ever be able to perform? Will I ever be able to speak? Will I teach? And the questions that didn't come to my head at that point were, will I be okay after I'm healed? Mm. Will I be able to raise a family that is solid and raise kids? Will I be a good father? A good husband? Those things did not hit me at that point. Mm. I only cared about
the
work. And then it made me ask myself about the concept of purpose. Or at which point do we align all these things? Like, what does my work connect to in a bigger scheme of things? What am I doing in a bigger scheme of things? Like, what is it that holds me sane? If family collapses, is the work the one that holds me sane? If work collapses, is family the one that holds me? So, and back to the very beginning of the dialogue about the community and the individual, that for mental stability, we do need a society. It's the only way that we can breathe, is if the community holds the space for us. And you realize that it's beyond occupations. It is absolute coexistence. And that's what it is. That's where the health sits. Like, if a society or a community is healthy, the individuals will strive. They will win. Because they're held and not proving any point to anyone. They're literally responding to space and implementing and leaving. There's a sense of duty. We're here because for the same purpose. My appointment is this one, yours is this one, and I do my mandate. And when I'm done, I leave. But now the work has changed. It's to prove a point, to try and please. Like, we're doing so much work that I think the community can help in, dispersing and taking away, and that we are left with the essence of what is it that we're here for. And that can bring a lot of stability. And it's in a healthy community that is able to be achieved. So our community of arts and everything, one prays and hope that we do reach a very healthy way, organization, that as individuals we can live even outside of it.
So you said it so beautifully. With a healthy community, every individual will strive
Sure.
and live,
Sure.
because there are people that are living
Sure.
and there are people that are surviving.
Yeah.
Before we wrap this up, I want us to just talk about that,
Sure.
especially as artists
Mm.
in this very hostile industry,
Sure.
an industry that will make or break you,
Mm.
an industry that when you, like you saying, when the work is taken away, what is left?
Sure.
Are we living or are we surviving?
Sure.
For the young artists out there,
Mm-hmm.
can you let them know why we are here?
Sure. Yo, man, you know, I'll say it again. There's more to life than our occupancy.
Mm.
And even the word occupancy, it's occupying a space.
Mm.
And
Occupation.
yes, you know.
Oh my God. Wow.
So we must walk into the world to go occupy spaces, right? So that we are purposeful, man. That my encounter with you leaves you better. And it does not have to be with me on stage performing. Of course, that's another way of like multiplying that work. But my engagement with human beings must, ideally, I imagine, to leave each other better, you know. And if I come here, because we've got different days and different.
Mm-hmm.
My encounter with my security there, so is a moment of occupancy.
Mm.
The work has begun there, right? So it's not enough to place everything on this hostile industry. It is not enough. We must find places to work and express ourselves fully.
We must live and not
Yes,
survive.
We mustn't survive. We must be here alive, so that when we're done and when death happens to us, we're also fine. Even the ones that we leave behind. It's like, that's the other thing that, you know, sometimes we don't think about enough, is the ones that stay. Because of the idea of loss and all of that, it is loss. But you must have lived so much that there is no loss in it, you know? That those who have experienced you have gotten everything that you needed to give them. Then you've lived. And if you're fine also with leaving, then you've done the work both ends, you know? You've encountered people and you've lived an experience and have left it with them. And another space and time.
Transcending to another realm.
You know, having been dutiful. And I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
This is why human beings have. I'll go back to societies. The reason why stock failure, the reason why there's churches, the reason why there's, you know, Langa and all these little things where people constantly meet, and there's always duties in these little pockets. So, you know, okay, but when I'm at church, I'm actually an usher, but Mona, treasurer, you know, there's a sense of importance even in other spaces. Like, you're worth it. You are worth it. You are important. Your occupation of space matters. Because you're working, you know. There's always a result in everything you do. So I think if we go back to that idea of having these communities constantly be part of people, then you will be resourceful and dutiful. People will benefit from you.
Yeah.
And you'll benefit from others. Instead of just one field of study. Because we're so limited, because we are in one faculty. That is the arts. So we are unable to learn from people who are doing commerce. We're unable to learn from other industries because we're not engaging at all with them. We're not in societies with them. We're in our own little societies. We speak about art only. We speak about, we don't speak about anything outside of our industry. And that's why when things collapse here, our spirits even collapse, and our minds can't hold.
Bruce Lee says immortality is living a life worth remembering.
Sure.
And that's what you had just said, just in different words.
Sure.
That live a life that when you do go, people don't feel like it's a loss.
Sure.
Because they've experienced you to the fullest.
Sure.
Because you lived. It wasn't just about survival.
Sure.
And because of that, you are not surviving, you are living because you are true to your purpose.
Yeah.
You are grounded in your purpose.
Sure.
And there's a yin and yang of understanding that as much as I am an individual, I am still part of a society.
Absolutely.
And I must engage with the society in order to create this timeless work.
Sure.
No matter how it will be presented, but the work will live forever. The language,
sure,
the story. Man, Billy Langa, my encounters with you are always amazing, man. My encounters with you are always amazing, and I will not be shy to say this with all the listeners listening, that you have truly been an inspiration in my life and in my work.
Thank you, brother.
And I really look forward to experiencing life more with you, my
Sure.
homie.
Word up.
Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you for the invitation. And also, I always think that these platforms are moments for us to reflect, to also take a look at our lives, if we are actually living or surviving. So thank you for this opportunity as well. And also for reminders of points in my life. The memories that you have are things that I might have forgotten, that I've shared, So thank you for the timeline, for tracking time and archiving it, because we do want to live long.
Yes.
And outside of our bodies.
Yes, outside of our bodies.
Yeah. So I do appreciate you, my brother, for the invitation and for constant curiosity, because it makes me even more curious. Word up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Billy Langa, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you on the next episode. My name is Stingo Ngobese. Until next time, peace.
Halal.